Okay. Hi, and welcome to the Web Performance Working Group. As always, this call will be recorded and posted online. On the agenda today, we have a few exciting things around publishing and then some issue triage. But first, one thing I wanted to mention, I sent out a survey on meeting recordings and whether you all find them useful or painful or both. And if you haven't filled that out, I'd highly appreciate if you would, because yeah, there may be some future changes around that, and I would like them to be informed by more than just my own opinions. So please fill out the survey. Thank you. And with that, let's talk about publishing. So this current, essentially this week, as part of Norm Rosenthal's work on the fetch, we needed some changes to HR time and fetch to rely on them. We easily made the changes to HR time, but then publishing those changes was a somewhat manual process. It turns out that we have set up auto-publishing for HR time many years ago, based on a resolution the group took in 2015. But that auto-publishing pipeline broke for some reason. The GitHub tokens were no longer in effect or something along those lines. So it seems like we need, in order to establish an auto-publishing pipeline, we need to link to a URL where the working group is making a decision to auto-publish drafts. And it seems that we can refresh that decision, since 2015 was a long time ago. So the first question I would like to ask the group is whether we can make such a decision, or whether there are objections to auto-publishing of working drafts. Okay, I see thumbs up.
Can you clarify what that means, actually?
Oh, okay.
Sure I understand.
So essentially, there is a working draft that is published on the W3C's site under /tr/HR time-3 or resource timing-3, or whatever it is, the spec that we're talking about. And that is a published working draft. Whereas when we work on the editor draft of the various specs and commit new changes to them, they are not automatically published unless we decide that they should be. That means that other specs can't reference those changes until we publish those commits. And that is something that, at least when it comes to working drafts, doesn't make a ton of sense, because there is no, there are no implications, no IPR or other implications of just publishing them, other than the fact that it makes it hard to reference them. So yeah, that's basically what I'm suggesting, to auto-publish commits so that when we land a PR in HR time, in resource timing, or any other of the specs that are currently in a working draft status, that will auto-publish that to W3C/tr/spec name. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally makes sense.
Okay. Cool. Karine, do you does the auto-publishing, I'm assuming that it doesn't extend to specs that are no longer in working draft status. Is that a correct assumption? Or do we also want to auto-publish those?
Well, actually, I think that we can do that for CR updates as well.
Okay, so for CRs as well.
Yes, it's just for those that require transition request, we can't do that, of course, but we need a group decision for transitions. But all the other levels, so working drafts or CR updates, are okay to publish upon commit.
Okay, awesome. So any objections to extending that to CRs as well?
I don't have any objections. Are there any downsides? I mean, like, I guess that's what I don't. What would be somebody's objection?
I'm not aware of any, but maybe Karine can tell us more. If there
Well,
are.
I would say it's mostly trusting the editors. I don't see any downside personally. Yeah, except if you want to extend the editor's rights to other people and then you want better control. But I don't think that's a big issue.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So decision made. Okay, other than that, I was looking through the list of specs that we have in the spec status spreadsheet, and let me try to open it in a tab I can share. Okay. So essentially, looking at that list, we have HR time 2 is in rec, HR time 3 is a working draft. That's fine to leave it at that for now. For performance timeline, we have two parallel working drafts. So we have L2 that was in PR, if I remember correctly, and then we made some changes to it and then brought it back to a working draft as a result. And now we have two working drafts in parallel. In my view, it makes sense to take L2 again through the to CR and PR and then eventually to rec, unless there are any objections or any open issues. I think that we have, like, as far as the issues that are marked as level 2, all of them are currently closed. Other than a test saying ensure that, other than an issue saying that we need to ensure the tests are clean. So does it make sense for us to move performance timeline V2 to CR? And if so, what's the, like, do we need a call for consensus on that, or does a working group decision, like, is a working group decision enough?
Do you remember why it was moved back to working draft?
I think because we added features around the basically changed the, like, the performance observer types and like added the type and the buffered flag. I believe that was the reason for that.
Right. I don't see the buffered flag in level 2, but I do see supported entry types.
Okay, so maybe supported entry types was the difference. We can probably do some more archaeology if that would make folks more comfortable with that.
I mean, it probably makes sense to ask if people have any objections to the additions to L2, but I don't think there's any. And then based on that, do as little process as possible to move it to rec. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think so. It seems like if we are, yeah. Let me just if we go to GitHub on and see what the level 2 branch tells us. 95 commits behind. That seems like a lot of commits. What were the most recent? So we merged back the use of registry. Yeah, and we removed the buffered flag from L2 and decided it's L3 only. And then
it seems we added type to L2 as well.
Yeah, so we added type, but not the buffered flag. Does that make sense for folks? Do we need, so first of all, question for Karine. Do we need anything beyond the working group decision in order to move L2, like performance timeline L2 now to CR? Or if that is sufficient, can we make that working group decision now? Because or is there are there any objections?
So we can do it now on the call and get this recorded on the minutes. We really need to sense if there are likely objections, because if we get them later, it doesn't bring anything if we don't go for an email call for consensus and we discover later that we have objections and we get them at CR after the transition. So it's better if we have, at least we are 100% sure that the group is okay with that, with the current content.
So I'm not sure I got all that. So do we need a separate email asking the group if anyone objects, or will like a decision on the call be sufficient, because objections later will just
I would be more comfortable with the call for consensus by email.
Okay.
It was not in the agenda in the first place. People may not have looked at it. It doesn't look like it's yeah.
Okay, makes sense. So I can
like this, but I feel that that given the question we had just now, that people need take some time back and look at it and then agree.
That makes sense. So I can probably take an action item to send out a call for consensus to move performance timeline L2 from working graph to CR. Yeah.
Is there something that you want to do with level 3 at the same time?
I'm not sure if we, so right now, level 3 has a few more things that L2 doesn't have. So the buffered flag, do you remember, Nicholas, do you remember if we added anything beyond the buffered flag to L3?
So I also recently added number of dropped entries.
Oh, yes.
Other than that, don't remember anything else.
Yeah. So I think that it makes, from my perspective, it makes sense to publish L2 to rec. And then for L3, we just move it to a living standard model, which last time we discussed this with Philippe, if I remember correctly. We talked about moving the drafts to CR and then continuously maintaining CR as the published living standard.
Yeah, understood. That's the overall picture, but I think at the same time as if we are sending a Corfan consensus for level 2, I think that we could also ask if we want to publish a first public working draft of level 3, which has never been published yet.
Oh,
So,
we never published the first public working draft for L3?
I'm aware of.
Okay,
that's why I'm asking.
Okay, that makes
Does this also have auto publishing? Like, this seems just like a tooling issue more than anything else.
Yeah, for the auto publishing is just a tooling issue beyond the decision that we just recorded 5 minutes ago. So yeah.
Yes, those ones need transition approval from the working group. So that's typically the cases where we don't do automatic publication.
Okay, so yes, so I can take an action item to send the CFC on performance timeline to move L2 to CR and to publish the first public working draft of L3. I was really under the assumption that that already happened, but so apologies.
It's okay.
Just a quick addition to the difference between L2 and L3. I think L3, the disconnect method also clears the options list, which L2 doesn't have, I think.
Clears what?
Right.
Clears the options list.
Oh, okay.
Like the entries being observed, you mean? Or
the disconnect method? Yeah, empty context objects options list, the step 3. I don't think we have that in L2.
Right.
Okay. Any more comments on performance timeline? Okay, so moving on to resource timing and navigation timing. Norm Rosenthal is doing a bunch of work on integrating both of them with Fetch and HTML, which was the big holdup for us from moving from L2 to L3. And then there's a big question there if we want to publish L2 for both of them to rec or not, because it seems like for resource timing, L2 is a working draft, and for navigation timing, it's a CR. And personally, I think it would make sense to just move both of them to the living standard model. Now that we have the fetch integration behind us, we can move both of them and then just add new features on top of that without worrying too much about levels. I think that bringing them to rec will just take a long time, in which we'll have two versions in parallel to maintain, and this is work I would prefer to avoid. Does that make general sense?
Yes, please let's not do the dual tracking again if it can be avoided.
Awesome. Cool. So on that front, Karine, what would be the procedural bit here? Do we also need a call for consensus to move them to the living standard model?
So I'm wondering, the resolution would be to keep the two levels?
The resolution would be to drop L3, stay on L2 forevermore, and move that to like CR-based living standard.
Okay, so we need the call for consensus just for the CR?
We need a call for consensus for the CR on resource timing and on navigation timing, maybe because it will undergo significant changes as part of the fetch and HTML integration, and which may, like, I don't know if that would result in downgrading it to a working graph. And then what's the, like, once we have both of them in CR, do we need anything else in order to move them to the living standard status, or we just need to continue to publish them as CRs?
It stays in CR forever, basically, and you have something in the status of the document that says that it's a living standard.
Okay.
So what I'm wondering, what do we do about resource timing level 1, which was never published as a rec? Do we want to drop it and say that resource timing living standard is superseding that? And
yeah. Or we could move level 1. Like, I don't think level 1 has open issues, for example. I'm not sure.
I think the reason why, I guess I suppose that the reason why it's still level 1 is still in CR is for implementation problems or testing.
I don't.
It was CR since 4 years ago. So that's
Yeah. I suspect that it's just that we haven't done a great job at making sure it's not in CR for 4 years. Let me.
Well, if we have
so
an immediate.
If I'm looking at the tests, I suspect that a lot of the L1 bits are already, yeah, maybe this will require some analysis of which tests are L1 related versus not. Yeah.
Well, it's look entirely possible to push into recommendation very easily.
Okay.
Given that result. So it depends on what the group wants to do. If the group wants to say it's a living standard and stop with that level 1 recommendation, put it in level 2, well, consider level 2 is the right one. Drop level 1, well, drop levels altogether in some way. That's okay as well.
I don't have strong opinions. I would like, I have a slight preference to pushing forward the L1 to rec if you say it would be easy, and then you know, just to make sure that bit is Yeah, documented. I wonder about Apple folks who I don't know if they ever implemented L2, if they would have a strong opinions here, but they're not on this call. So does anyone else here have a strong preference regarding L1 and whether we should publish it or abandon it? Crickets.
I personally find having all kinds of versions makes me feel confusing. Because I think when we actually implementing stuff, we always refer to the latest one, like the L3 one, as the standard one. So having both L3 and having both L2 and L3 already makes me like why do I have both?
Yeah. Yeah. So the plan is to not have both L3 and L2 and L3. The question is like regarding L1, but you're saying levels in general are something we may want to drop, and as part of that, maybe drop L1 entirely and not put or to rec. Okay, I'm fine with that as well. It might be, maybe I can formulate like an email to the group about moving L2 to CR, and then as part of that, also see if anyone has strong opinions regarding keeping L1. Basically a CFC to move L2 to CR and abandon L1 and see if anyone objects. Does that make sense as a path forward?
And then what is L3 is now going to be the living standard?
We will, there will be no L3. We will merge whatever work we did in L3, which I don't think we really did, back to L2, and then keep L2 as a living standard.
Okay,
so
sure.
Basically, it's removing the level altogether, since L1 would not exist anymore.
Yeah.
Sounds good to me.
Cool.
So should we do that for performance timeline too? Sorry.
So performance timeline, we already published L1. We can,
I mean for L2 versus L3.
For L2, maybe we can drop L2 and we can do that.
I mean, if no one really cares about the published L2 version, what's the point of doing all the work for it, right?
So that would mean change the previous resolution we made to merge level 2, 3, and move that to CR?
Yeah, so that would mean, change the resolution we made 10 minutes ago to abandon L2 or I guess maybe, I don't know if that changes the resolution. Maybe
no,
it
actually,
means
it does.
we abandon L3. We move L2 to CR. We merge L3 to L2, and L2 will be the living standard from now on, and we abandon L3.
Or I look at it as thinking rename L3 to L2, and
merge them, remove the name level, and push that to CR, and would become the living standard.
Yeah. So let's do that. So I think that the CFC is the same CFC. It's just that the path is different. Instead of aiming to take L2 to rec, we just bring it to CR and leave it there and merge L3 back to it.
Yes, merge first, I guess, and then transition.
But this is why I'm saying I would just think L3 is just basically the new L2. There's no need to merge because it's all the changes have been on top of L2. There's no contradictory changes. So right now we have two branches, which is one is level 2 and the other is GH pages, which is level 3. So it's just renaming GH pages to be the actual level 2.
Yes, and then we abandoned the level 2 branch, and yeah, I don't think it. You can look at it as merging, other than the fact that we won't be actually doing any merges. Does that make sense?
Yes, I'm looking at practically what would be the place to publish this. Because we have URIs that contains that -2 at the end.
Yeah, I believe so. That for performance timeline, I'm not sure that we have a -3 because we just said we never published.
Yeah, we don't have the -3 yet,
Yeah.
and performance timeline.
So it is now a benefit now that not having a 3.
Yes. Laziness pays.
Yes, so I think that we could reclaim the short name without the number at the end. I'll need to check that with the webmaster if it's okay, because currently we have a short name without any level, which is supposed to point to the latest version of the highest level.
Yeah. If we can reclaim that for L2, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, but I'm wondering how to access level 1 actually.
Oh.
Seems that -1 is not putting me there.
Oh, right now the version with no.
Level 1 did not have any -1. If we reclaim, well, it doesn't change the current situation, just that the performance timeline with nothing points to level 2 anyway. So we just remove level 2 from the title and republish as CR. No matter what the content is, it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
That we are going to probably drop the -2 from the latest published version URI as well. Okay, I think that's not an issue.
Cool. Yeah, and -1 gives me a 404.
Yeah, probably only the dated version are accessible. They are no longer advertised. You can find it if you say /all at the end. Then you get the list of the recommendation.
Okay.
Yeah, the short name
was. But that's an existing. We'll need to fix that. It sounds like a hosting issue rather than a decision-related one. Okay. Cool. And now, so shall we move down the list to user timing? So basically for user timing, we have actually published L1 and L2, and now L3 is a working draft, which similarly, it seems like it would be worthwhile to push to CR and then make that L3 the living standard for all the future user timing needs. Does that make sense? Any objections? If not, I can send I can have the CFC include that as well.
It's my understanding correct that we call CR living standard? Or like what does a living standard mean?
So my understanding is that we now have two versions of living standards. One is that we push spec to rec, and then we republish as rec any other like future changes, but that there's a bunch of process related to that. The easier version is that we push a spec to CR, say that it's now a living standard, and future changes are republished as CR. And if I understand correctly, and correct me, Karine, if I'm wrong, without requiring any further process. So in a very similar way to how the HTML spec and fetch are maintaining the WebWG, where for things that are PRs that are landing require group consensus or some form of consensus, and then they are automatically published as part of the standard. That would be a similar situation here.
So if we do that for user timing, and we move the L3 to CR, do we still need to have those L1, L2 in a rec status?
They will remain published, but yeah, we can generally ignore them as historical artifacts.
Okay. So no broader vendors actually like supporting those versions, right?
We can declare them as superseded by the higher levels. So that's the old way to do that was to supersede the old recommendations. Typically, groups that keep old recommendations do that for reasons when you have kind of profiling the spec, like having a 1.0 that would be quite easy and implemented in some situations, and you have a 2.0 that have additional features that will be used in other situations. And people would want to keep the 1.0 because it's easier, it's simpler, and the use case for having the simpler version still exists. So, which is not the case for any of the spec of this working group, I believe. I think we want to always progress to the highest level. The way we could also do it is, yeah, I think that's because level 2 was published under the previous process. We can't really use it as, I believe, we can't use it as a living standard.
Yeah, that is correct.
So we have to push level 3. We may also remove the level 3 from the title. We push that to CR and declare that it supersedes level 2 and level 1 when we enter recommendation, and use the process 2020 to amend the recommendation with candidate changes regularly. That's one possibility. The other possibility is to enter CR and stay in CR forever. That way we can't really supersede the previous recommendations because only the new recommendation would do that. We could obsolete the old ones. That's another possibility. Stay forever in CR and regularly, at least once a year, publish CR snapshots, which are the CRs that require group approval, but ensure that the patent policy protection is on the content of the spec. So for the moment, the forever CR versus recommendation with candidate changes are the two models that you described earlier, Geoff, and it's not decided which is the best one for the groups. I think that we need to go for CR for that what is in level 3 at the moment, which is just working draft. So we have some time before we have to decide whether we want to push that to recommendation or stay for CR forever. We don't need to decide that now.
Yeah, I think that the group previously decided that the forever CR model is more like favorable, but yeah, agree that we can start by pushing the working draft to CR, and yeah, and then seeing that in like revisiting that in the future if needed. Okay. And then what we have left is on the list, page visibility, which is currently in PR. And there is still one HTML integration related issue to resolve, and then we'd be able to potentially take it to rec. But maybe we need to do that first before making a decision on this front.
How much work is it to solve the HTML integration issue?
I see Michael's face in the the assignee column on this one. So, Michael, you looked into this one, right?
Sorry, I was partially distracted. The page
Yeah.
visibility?
Page visibility, issue 51 that I'm currently presenting. Yeah. How much work would it take to take that over the finishing line?
Finish line?
Yeah, over the finish line.
Honestly, perhaps as little as like a day. Yeah, I think it's pretty well outlined what it would take here. There would be changes to both this spec HTML and some dependencies, but generally speaking, it's not too bad.
Do you think it's something you'd be able to push in the near future?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I thought we decided that this was not blocking these things moving forward, but yeah, we could do that.
Yeah, so it's yeah, basically I believe that in order to move to rec, we need to close all the open issues, and this seems to be the last one.
Okay, I'll take it. I'll finally do it.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, and I think that in terms of testing status, we are in perfect shape.
I mean, that's a little... Page visibility testing is not the best testing, but yes.
Yeah, I think that a lot of the testing requires like manual tests, but yeah. Yeah, or but yeah, so it seems like we just have this last issue left, and then we can take it to rec. And the other last one that I have on my list is the Beacon API, which is zero open issues. It's currently in CR, and we can take it to PR, zero open issues. And as far as the tests go, we are almost green. I mean, we have like 2 implementations for each one of the tests, but no, let me Share, is that the right one? No, that's not the right one. Sorry. Yeah, so we have two implementations passing. Oh, not even. No, there's a econ basic. Yeah, do we need perfect perfect score on tests to move to PR, Kareem? Or can we take it to PR and fix the tests on our way to rep?
It's better if it's tested completely before entering PR, I mean.
Okay.
In some cases, well, it doesn't have to be perfect. If we can justify that there is an issue and we have identified the issue, then that's okay.
Yeah, I think it would be simpler to just fix, like, there are those like Chromium failures that I suspect are not.
That one's pass for Firefox and Safari, so that's not an issue.
Oh, okay. Yeah, true. So we have passing.
We have a couple of implementation for each test, which is okay.
Yeah, and
it doesn't
here
have to be one passing everything.
Yeah, so we have two implementations passing on each one of the tests.
Yeah, so that's okay.
Okay. So similarly, in order to move that to PR, is that I'm guessing it's like a CFC, but potentially a separate one, because the other ones are to move to CR, I guess, or can I send everything to a single CFC?
Yeah, I'd rather have a separate one, but
okay, cool.
As you wish.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, writing emails is cheap, presumably. Yeah, okay, cool. So I think we have a bunch of action items for the chairs here. Nick, we can probably negotiate offline.
Yeah.
About,
split it up.
Yeah, splitting it up. Cool. And with that, we have full 8 minutes to talk about the different issues. So, Nick, do you want to talk about the navigation timing issues, and I will take over scribing?
Sure. Let's see. So the first issue that was on the list, I think from last time or time before that, and I'm not sure, we might have actually already resolved this one. I was going to talk about navigation timing issue 126. Yeah, I think we've actually already talked about this in previous one. So this is about possibility of getting the HTTP status code from the response header.
Yeah. We talked about it a while back and said that this is like an L3 that now we know will never happen. But yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but basically something that was postponed after the HTML and fetch integration, which are happening very soonish, and then we can, rediscuss this in terms of exposing the status code. It feels like something that we would want to move to resource timing, theoretically, right?
Probably, yeah. And I think we do have that case over in resource timing as well, or a status code case over there.
Oh, a similar issue there?
I think so.
Okay.
I can do some research on that and see if I can find something.
I have a question. you mentioned in the navigation timing issue that it would require some sort of opt-in. Sorry, where's that? For navigation timing?
So I think that for navigation timing, it doesn't, but if we wanted to extend that to resource timing, it would.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yep. Yeah, there's a related resource timing case number 90 that's been open since 2017.
90? Okay.
90.
Okay. So yeah, it probably makes sense to fold this one into the other one.
Agreed. Okay, that makes sense. Let's see, 5 minutes left. So another issue that was opened up is navigation timing issue number 140. The title is app cache meaning, and the question is around the block of time that we have in the diagram that is just listed as app cache. And I think it's more of a kind of a clarification question around like what times can go in there, or what components can contribute to non-zero time in the app cache. I came across another issue recently, and I think Yov, you had commented on it or something around do we even need to describe app cache because of other scenarios? I'm trying to recall what it was.
My natural tendency would be to say app cache is dead. Let's not bother with defining it all too much. I don't know if this is Benjamin, do you know if Firefox similarly removed or planning to remove app cache?
Deprecated.
So in the case of the navigation timing API, though, I think it's not like the app cache feature. I think we were referring to the browser's cache. General. Like let me see. I may be wrong on that. So in the diagram that we have today, we have it right before like a DNS connection. And if I recall, way back in the day when we were defining navigation timing, it was more meant to be just the like general browser cache lookup phase, like how long it took to look at the disk back in spinning disk days, to see if that resource was already serviceable from the cache. It may have migrated over time to be called app cache in the diagram, but I don't know if that was necessarily like the app cache thing that we're talking about.
Okay, but as far as implementations go, either we look at this cache or we don't at all and go to the network. So it's kind of like there's no real scenario, as far as I know, that we go to disk to get a resource and then go to the network after that. So it doesn't necessarily like that. Like I'm not sure that kind of definition makes sense.
I think what he's saying is if you try to see if it's in the disk cache and it fails, then you have to go to the network. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, otherwise, I also don't understand what's the difference between fetch start and DNS start. I think basically the question is, what time is captured by that delta?
We often see a non-zero delta from that, and we've often attributed that to disks spinning up and things not being serviced by that cache before you actually went to the network to do the DNS lookup.
So I don't think, theoretically, I would assume that we're not going to disk unless we're sure we'll find something there. But that may be a wrong
it feels like
assumption.
that time would be very short. So I think it's worth investigating what's going on, right? And in particular, if it's just Chrome implementation problem, or if it happens in other user agents as well. Does that make sense?
For example, back in the old Internet Explorer days, I think that time was often just accessing the cache index. Even if you didn't have the entry in the cache, it was reading in the index for that domain to know what was for it.
Yeah, but
Anyway,
that index is in memory, right? Or
not for the.
Not necessarily.
Maybe not.
Okay.
Yeah. I can do a little bit of research here to see if we in this day and age see any significant difference between fetch start and domain lookup start for resources that have that. And the original question was basically what is that time? If there is non-zero time there, how should we be thinking about it? So we can try to at least inform that decision a little bit.
Yeah, it would be interesting to do some research there, and yeah.
I'll follow up on that. Yep.
Awesome.
Out of time. Thank you everybody for joining. I just wanted to really quick point everybody to GNOME's 2 PRs for nav timing and resource timing if you haven't looked at them, with major changes for the fetch integration if you're interested. It's awesome. A lot of work there. So.
Yep. Thanks all.